Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. This is the third webinar in our Financial Health for Seniors webinar series. It will be hosted by Rianne Rideout from Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. As you know, the CSI has undertaken an initiative to put together material, presentation material, a website and webinars in order to help our designation holders be better prepared to deal with the challenges that our seniors are facing. Not only that, but they can have family members that are also facing these challenges. So it's kind of a double benefit for all of those who are able to access the material. Our ultimate goal is to provide better advice to seniors through our designation holders, and to ultimately have our designation holders able to go out into the community and make presentations to seniors and their families. Today, we're going to be holding a webinar on elder abuse, and it'll be hosted by Rianne Rideout. Before I get to Rianne, just a few items. You are all on mute. In order to ask questions, you can refer to the bottom of the screen. There's a Q&A button that will allow you to ask questions, and at about 12:45 or 45 minutes into the presentation, we will start to take questions, and I'll be giving your questions with Rianne. If we don't finish all the questions, we'll try and answer them afterwards. Just note also that we're not providing continuing education credits for these webinars, as they are quite short. Also note that Rianne comes from Ontario, so she represents Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. However, she will try and make references to other parts of Canada, as elder abuse is treated differently from province to province. So Rianne Rideout is currently the Director of Provincial Partnerships and Outreach for Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. She is responsible for implementing Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse. For the past 16 years, she has served as the Central East Regional Elder Abuse Consultant. She is also an instructor for the Foundations of Elder and Prevention courses at Trent University, and has co-host authored research articles on elder abuse. She has previously co-chaired the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and a member of the board. She has also worked as a consultant for the Manitoba Seniors Directorate and as a addictions counselor for Addictions Foundation of Manitoba. So without further ado, let's go, Rianne Rideout.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie, for that nice introduction. So welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about understanding the complexities of elder abuse. We have a few general overview of elder abuse today. We're going to talk around what elder abuse is defined, how ageism affects elder abuse, look at the various forms of abuse. We're going to go through each one, talk about how we can recognize the indicators, behavioral signs that we might be seeing from individuals that you might come across in your work. We'll talk about some risk factors that predispose older adults to elder abuse. I'll go through an outline of some of the legal obligations for reporting. And as Marie indicated, the reporting legislations are a little bit different in each province and territory or jurisdiction. So we'll kind of go over that. We'll talk a little bit around rules of responding and supporting older adults, as well as review some provincial and national agencies that can support you or get more information and resources to support your work and do education in the community. So just a little bit about our organization. I have worked for Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario for about 17 years now, and our mandate hasn't changed over the years. What we're striving to do is make sure seniors live free from abuse, have a strong voice, and feel safe and respected. Our organization was given the opportunity to implement Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse in 2003. And that strategy we were actually the first province in Canada to have a strategy around elder abuse. Other provinces and territories have since followed that. Our three mandated goals around the strategy are really to coordinate community services, to provide training and education out in the communities to both service providers and seniors, and do public education and awareness. And we do this through working with our community partners, such as yourselves. We can't combat elder abuse alone. We have to work in collaboration with each other, learn what our strengths are, how we can support individuals in the community. Every province and territory is different in terms of that response. So in Ontario particularly, we don't have designated authorities such as they have health authorities that have a mandatory response. So we work collaboratively with our community partners to work together to respond to cases of abuse. So we've spent a lot of our time working with our community partners, and we do training to all different sectors, from financial advisors to dental assistants, to hospital staff, etc. So it's quite broad in terms of the training that we're doing, and we're finding that increasing over time. So I'm pleased to be here today because I think it's important in your position as financial advisors and working in the financial industry to have the skills to recognize signs of abuse. And sometimes we come across situations where we may suspect something's going on, but really not sure. Is it potential abuse? Is someone taking advantage? Is there undue influence that's going on? So as we go through the presentations, hopefully you'll get some more tips on how to detect some of those signs that you might be seeing where a client is sitting in front of you, maybe with their loved one, and you can sort of pick out some of those uneasy feelings where you may be seniors concealing the evidence of the behaviors and changes that are going on. They may be not forthcoming about this. So hopefully we'll go through this presentation to give you better skills to recognize what those are. I think it's also important to recognize also what your personal values and beliefs are around seniors. We'll talk a little around that to get some little bit more clarification and how that influences it, and recognizing what those red flags are. So as we go through this, we're kind of like little investigators as we go through this. And even when you're talking with clients, is sort of picking up things that may not seem right, or cue you to say, maybe I need to ask more questions because this isn't maybe this typical behavior that this client has had in the past, 4 or 5 years that you've known them. So we've also recognized that maybe having more senior clients in your workplace. So we have an aging population, which I don't think is new to many people. If you look at this statistic here from aging in the 21st century, within 10 years, there'll be 1 billion older adults, in the world. And then if we look at this and just in the population of Canada, over the next 20 years, Canadian seniors are expected to grow by 68%. So this is quite significant when we think of your client base that you're serving and how that trend in our senior population is growing. But it's not only just the population that's growing, but it's also when we look at the health dynamics. I'm going to pick on or just choose even issues around dementia. We are seeing a significant increase. We get reports around older adults who have dementia. So 20%, I think, is the current statistics of individuals that may be experiencing dementia, who may make them more vulnerable to victimization of financial abuse. So we need to sort of pay attention. If you look at the provinces and territories of where you're coming from or representing, that just shows the increase that is being expected over the next few years. So it's not a new thing that we shouldn't be prepared. We know that the population is growing. So by being more proactive and learning about these signs, hopefully we can prevent further abuse from happening. With the population aging, we know the prevalence of elder abuse within Canada is about 8.2%. So there was a study done in Canada about 2015. The results came out. It was a phone study to seniors in our communities, asking them if they'd had personally experienced elder abuse. And these are the facts that seniors are reporting. And ironically, we see financial abuse and psychological abuse as the top two forms of abuse that are reported. So psychological abuse was 2.7%, followed very closely by financial abuse. And you can see the other forms of abuse, which we'll go through each form, but these are the two that I think that you may come across most often in your workplace. So with that study, when you start extrapolating what does 8.2% mean, that's about over 766,000 seniors in Canada that are experiencing abuse. And so and we know that that number is very underestimated. Most people are very hesitant about coming forward to disclose that their family members or someone close to them has violated their trust and their authority. So they maybe there's fear. So we estimate that number to be much higher than it is reported. And then with the World Health Organization in 2018, they reported across the world that 1 in 6 older adults, 60 years of age or older, living in the community are experiencing abuse. So, you know, when you think about this percentage of how many people are affected and our population growth, it's an issue that we really do need to become more aware of so we can protect not only the clients, but our loved ones and family members in our communities as well. Also, the Public Health Agency in Canada did a report on family violence, and they included elder abuse within that report. And one of the findings was based also, they had reflected on that National Initiative for Care of the Elderly study, but every day 8 seniors are victims of family violence. And it's really an indicator that families are in crisis and that we need help. And we are all in a position that we can do something about this. So again, I bring back to, we have to look at our own personal and professional values. So how do we perceive older adults in our workplace? Are we positive about having senior clients? Is there negative attitudes? And because those will influence how we deliver our services, how we communicate with our clients, how much time we provide, just everything that communication. We find that ageism or discrimination is the most tolerated form of social injustice in Canada. It's, we don't hear as much about it as we do maybe some of the other discrimination practices, but it is out there. And seniors are vocal saying that they themselves feel like they are discriminated against. And they feel like second-class citizens. They're not valued, or they see themselves as invisible. So the Rivera report, which is in Canada, did a study asking seniors, and there's ageist statements that we see and hear about, you're too old for that job, or older adults are so forgetful, or they get so many benefits. There's when we think about aging and asking people, talk about aging, what are the things that come to your mind? Most people don't think about the positive things about aging. It's a lot of that negativity, and we need to overcome that if we're going to provide good quality service to the clients that we serve. So seniors, I say 6 in 10 seniors, 66 years of age, say that they've been treated unfairly or differently because of their age. So again, this is coming from their experience with professionals, with community, with family. 1 in 3 admit they're treated differently just because of their age. And that increases 43% for younger population admitting to ageist behavior. So we have our younger generation that we also need to make that shift in terms of educating them. We're all ages, so we need to take a hold on this, because getting our client base could be obviously going to be increasing as our population grows. So having that sensitivity to the needs and of those individuals and their health care, understanding those complexities really will make an impact on how we deliver those services and looking out for their needs. I think it's important also to say, sometimes people think, well, how important is ageism to elder abuse? One of the important things to understand is that our values and perceptions is how we treat individuals. So if we have negative attitudes toward an individual, that is kind of the root cause of elder abuse. If we don't care, we don't put the value, then the respect and dignity just starts to erode, and seniors start to feel abused and so less treated unfairly. It also can have a big impact on their health. This report here indicated that people internalize it emotionally, feeling less worthy, worthless, causing depression. That can actually affect someone's life by 7.5 years of, take that much off their life's expectancy. So when we're talking about elder abuse, we refer, and many other organizations do, as elder abuse is called, or what we refer to as the World Health Organization. So it's a single repeated act of appropriate action occurring within a relationship of trust, which causes harm or distress to the individual. The key words in that definition, and others who have adapted that definition a little bit, but you'll find whatever the definition, that there is a relationship of trust and it causes harm. So when we think about trust, we're not talking, and when we're talking today, it's not about frauds and scams, although we know that that's quite prevalent in our communities. We're talking about that person who knows the individual, who's taken advantage of that relationship that they've formed with the individual and caused them hardship or distress. It also could be a lack of care, which leads to neglect. And it's occurring in our community, it's occurring within our families, and it's also occurring within institutional settings. So retirement homes and long-term care homes, hospital, from family, we'll get into that in a second, but also it's those in close proximity who have that relationship with the individual. And in community, it could be a person who befriends an individual, it could be their next door neighbor, it could be a professional, healthcare worker, it could be an advisor, it could be anyone in that position of authority, a tradesperson, for instance, who sort of, feels a person out, sees their vulnerabilities and starts to take advantage of that individual. So we have to pay attention that it can happen all around us, in all those different settings. And those who are at risk, those individuals who may be at poor health are at increased risk of experiencing abuse. So the study that was done, as I indicated, the 76 over 766,000. But if you look at those who also have a higher rate, are those with disabilities, Indigenous women, as a population, and also people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or questioning. So that puts an individual at increased risk for potentially family violence and elder abuse. And also the biggest vulnerability that we see, I know that when I get reports, is around that cognitive impairment, which you may have come across with some of your clients or have heard about. Dementia, mental health issues that compromises somebody's ability to make informed judgments and decision making. We also see that lack of support. And I think we're getting more, unfortunately, cases where seniors who have lack of family, maybe they haven't had children, there's no one there as a social support to rely on for family. Families live far away in jurisdictions because of work, employment, family takes them different places. So the older adult may not have that formal support system that they've had in their younger years because of death. Maybe some of their support friends have passed away. So that family involvement may have decreased over years. So with their social isolation, there's no one to sort of check on. The person has less individuals to communicate with, to disclose information or concerns with. They kind of keep it inside, and they don't know who to reach out to. And also, with some health concerns, sometimes there's that codependency or dependency upon family members. So maybe they need help with activities of daily living, like bathing, grocery, shopping, banking, right? Going to see yourselves as financial advisors. How did they get there? They're relying on families. That dependency creates at risk, because if they can't get there, then they could be harmed because they're not getting their medications. They're not getting to the bank to pay for the groceries that they need. We also seeing a dependency going the other way, where the family has moved back in with the older adult. Again, that's that vulnerability where the person gets taken advantage of, where there's a power and control indifference. Someone moving in, maybe into that actual parent's house who owns it, had the title and deed is on that property. However, the family moves into the typical basement idea, but then relies on the older adult to pay for all the food, the transport, they take the car, the insurance, etc. That relationship may change if there's only one older adult and there's 3 or 4 individuals in the family. That power shifts, that the person's authority and decision making starts to erode and not being the same. And when that trust and manipulation about you're going to do it my way, or we move out, or we're not going to provide the care that you need, that balance shifts. That's where we see abuse happening. And it's no different than any other forms of abuse like child abuse or domestic violence. So it is that power shift. Sometimes older adults don't even see that shift happening because it's sort of a slow progression over time. The person who's living with the individual may slowly start making decisions for the person, saying, oh, okay, well, you do that. You know what's best. You're younger. You make the financial decisions, because I can't be bothered to go to the bank and deal with all that, all these new regulations and decisions. You do it for me. So they start slowly do that. And they take advantage of powers of attorney And we see these progressions slowly happening. And then sometimes it's not until we sort of point it out to an individual that they kind of go, oh, or you do education in the community, such as yourselves, and people kind of go, that's me. And I've had that happen. I've had people come up after a presentation and say, I never recognized it or named it before, but this is the circumstances that I'm in. My kids are actually doing this. So we see that unbalance, the dependency, the isolation, people feeling powerless. They don't know what to do. They don't know who to reach out to. They feel frightened or intimidated, or even humiliated. Like, how could my family even do this to me? I never thought my kids would do this. I've heard that many times, unfortunately, in my work. And it is quite sad to see, but unfortunately, we need to be, it happens, but we need to be in a position to give them the strength and the empowerment and the resources and supports to eliminate that, and support them through that process, particularly finances, because we need those financial resources to live the quality of life that they've invested in and cherished, to live their life the way that they wanted to in the future. So those with responsive behaviors or abusive behaviors could be anyone. So really it's that family, but it could be care staff, could be intimate partner, could be volunteers. I say resident to resident because we also see that within long-term care or retirement homes. And again, anyone, as I indicated, that is in the community. I am going to see if this video works. Whoops, sorry.
Many Canadians are in the dark about elder abuse, but turning a blind eye will only make the problem worse. Financial, physical, emotional, neglect. It's time to face the reality of elder abuse. Learn more at seniors.gc.ca or call for a brochure. A message from the Government of Canada.
So that video was actually done by the federal government. I'm not sure if many of you had seen that in the past. It really brought to light the issues of elder abuse in our community across Canada. So that was done actually in 2009, I believe. It was done in French and English, and it really brought the attention that we see so much other forms of neglect and abuse in the media. But after that commercial was shown, people started really talking about it. I know in my workplace, people were kind of going, I didn't realize that happened, right? And it's not something that people really feel comfortable about, but it was an excellent way to really get our country, people in our communities to start paying more attention to this issue that's happening. So I want to talk about the different forms of abuse now. We're going to go through each one of these in terms of financial, emotional, physical, sexual neglect, and just give some overview about looking for the warning signs as you may come across them in your workplace with individuals. So just a quick overview of physical violence. Really, it's an act that causes physical harm or injury to an individual or pain. So we see people who may be pushing an individual, restraining an individual, punching in person, just even might be just grabbing. Signs that you might see that they may not have, they may have broken glasses, or they don't have their glasses, or hearing aids aren't being provided. Person's broke them, they're not going to fix them. Signs of lethargy. So we see so many different, these are signs are easily to identify as opposed to more of the emotional abuse signs, because we can see the trauma or the pain or the impact as a result of that physical harm to that individual. We also see over medication or under medication. So someone either taking their medication, their drugs, any opiates that maybe a person's coming out of hospital and the person takes the medications and they go back to the doctor and say, well, why are you still in pain? And they don't admit that someone may be taking their medications from them, or someone's over medicating the person to make them drowsy, and they may come in to see you in the office and you kind of go, the person doesn't seem like themselves anymore. Like maybe they're under the influence of other medications that someone's giving them. You know, we don't know, but it's sort of things to pay attention to. The other one is medication, as I was talking about medication abuse. So there's a lack of, we see some medical chemical restraints, I should say, just, you know, that does cause harm to the individual. So you may not be able to see that particularly in the workplace, but if the person has changed behaviors or they're groggy, it all depends on, you know, different health conditions require different medications, but it can cause a person to be delirium, not thinking right, not be able to make financial decisions. We also see urinary tract infections, which is can cause an increase of their diminished capacity to make decisions. So if they're not getting the medications that they need, they may say, well, they're making these choices that are not normal. They're, you know, ask about some of those health concerns. Are they taking in medications or drugs? How long do they, when's the last time they've seen their doctor? If you're concerned, you know, those are just general kind of questions that you can inquire with someone if you're concerned about their sort of their medical status, if you've seen that change. Emotional abuse is tied to all forms of abuse. I don't think anyone can experience one form of abuse without the emotional attachment of either feeling fear or distress or anxiety. Humiliation is often affiliated with this. So we see this, it can happen by itself where someone's being intimidated, talked down to like a child, threatening or shouting to the person. They're destroying property. And what our value of what property to maybe an older adult, maybe it's a picture that they've always had and someone's ripped it up and that's never replaceable. That's, you know, emotional abuse. So if someone is saying things around, you know, nobody likes me, the statements are inconsistent about families. Maybe they're afraid if they come into your office with a family member and they're constantly looking at that person that's the caregiver or their loved one, and they're looking for them to give the response, right? If you're asking a question, they look at them, waiting for them to respond. You know, why is that? Is there a control issue there? Are they allowing them to speak in front of you? Those are things to sort of pay attention to. If you find that, you know, they're not able to get to appointments, are you able to do a home visit? Will the person let you in terms of that no visitation is an issue that we often get reported from family members to saying that I'm not allowed to go visit mom. I'm not allowed to call. She won't answer my phone calls because my brother won't let me talk to her on the phone. And if he does put me on the phone, he puts me on speakerphone so he can monitor all of our calls. So if you're calling about a concern that you have about their financial accounts, that particularly if maybe it's a power of attorney that's making some, you know, decisions, or you're just trying to check up on a transaction that the attorney, because just because someone's a power of attorney doesn't mean that they don't have the rights to see their information, depending on the extent of their capacity being unable to make those choices or decisions. So, you know, is there that prevention of information from that that individual who's got that control? So you paying attention to those inconsistencies, even tone of voice. Oh, hurry up, mom. You know, if they're coming into the office, I don't have all day. I need to get going. You know, make this quick. You know, just sign the papers and sign the documents so we can get out of here. Right? Those are kind of things that you need to be paying attention to if emotional abuse might be happening. Neglect is also, we're seeing cases where older adults' health or safety well-being is sort of at jeopardy because the person is either not provided care intentionally or unintentionally, where the caregiver or the family members aren't being bothered to go and check on the person. They aren't paying the heat bills. They're not delivering the groceries, taking to medical appointments. And as a result, the individual's quality of life fails. So this time of year with the winter, you know, we do get reports the odd time of the person's has no heat or electricity, or not allowed to turn the heat up is another one, that they control how much the heat goes up. Inappropriate clothing, the denial of access to services. If the person's coming in and they don't have the proper hearing aids or physical aids that they might need, or they say, well, I have to ask my daughter if I can get that. I can't afford that. And being your advisor, how much money the person has, and they say they can't afford that. That's kind of one of those warning signs saying, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, my daughter, she looks after my money. Those are cues that you might want to think about. So, which brings us to financial abuse. So this is the form of abuse that we get reports most often about. And I leave that to last because obviously this is of most importance to your industry. But really it's someone who's taking advantage of the older adult's money for their own personal monetary gain at the loss of the older adult. And I can say that this is probably the crime of the 21st century, and experts are saying that as well. 75% of the nation's wealth is held by people over the age of 50. And right now we have this, the highest time in history, we have that intergenerational transfer of wealth. So we have the growing population of older adults, as I've talked about previously. And now those individuals who have worked have pensions, if they're fortunate to have those, who've saved all their lives, have lived through the Depression, that want to live a great life. And now the younger generation who may be more struggling to find work and unemployment, who may be taking advantage of that financial gain that individual has and wealth that person has for their own best interests. We also see that vulnerability and mental decline, as I was talking about before. And there's less reporting. So these are issues that we need to be paying attention to. And we also see, unfortunately, more of scams happening, telephone scams. I know we're going to talk about that generally, but there are some investment fraud scams out there that people do get tied into because everyone wants that, if it's a high risk, people get roped into meeting the wrong person saying, this is a turnover, you invest in a year and you'll get 20-30% interest, and people get taken into that. So it's up to us to sort of warn them about what is legitimate and what's not. Again, 2/3 of financial abuse are committed by family members. So again, it could be a neighbor who's befriended the person. It could be the person who becomes that power of attorney. So not all powers of attorney are family, majority are, but that person who's in that position of power to control their finances. We see many, many cases of misuse of powers of attorney, and I'm sure that you have as well in your workplace. One of the components of financial abuse, I kind of put it down to 3 things around greed, false sense of entitlement, and opportunity. So they really want or need that money. So if it's greed, they're unemployed, they just feel it should be theirs, right? That there's opportunity, that false sense that I deserve it. I've been looking after mom for the last 2 years. I deserve to go on that holiday. She should pay for it, right? And sometimes family members will go against each other, saying if it's the daughter and then her brother saying, well, I deserve this, you don't do anything. You see that family conflict sometimes happening there too, around that sense of entitlement. Or it's going to be mine one day, so why don't you give it to me now, right? You've got all these investments. Wouldn't you like to see me enjoy it now while you're alive, as opposed to later, even though I'm going to get it later in the will? It's people will use those tactics. And there's opportunity. So opportunity to access funds. So we see that through powers of attorney, but also joint bank accounts for individuals. So sometimes older adults will put a loved one or a person that they trust onto their joint bank accounts to help pay for bills, manage funds, speak to banks on their behalf, and the person takes advantage of that opportunity. Because now with joint bank accounts and having full access and authority as powers of attorney, they go full tilt and drain bank accounts. And as my father used to say to me as I was younger, money doesn't always grow on trees, thinking that it's not always going to be there. Once it's gone, unfortunately for older adults, particularly those all older adults who have these huge financial losses, and we've seen those where individuals got $50, $60 or $100,000 or more, and their retirement home bills aren't being paid, and they get taken advantage of. Wonder they go to the bank and there's $10 left. Unfortunately, those cases are real. People have lost their homes because they've trusted family members. They've signed over mortgages, or they've asked for a loan. So they'll come to the advisor and say, my grandchild needs this, $50,000, $60,000 or $100,000 to help pay for a down payment of a house. And the person never gets that back. So often, because of that relationship, the person may not ask for anything in writing because they trust the individual over a generation that we took people's word for, that they will be honest to what they say. And unfortunately, we see that not happening. People will say, well, prove it, right? Prove that you gave, it was a gift. It wasn't really a loan. It was just a gift. You wanted me to have that. So unfortunately, we see that those cases of abuse happening. So this is another video the organization produced on financial abuse, and it was a public service announcement on TV.
Hey, babies. Check the propane?
Yeah.
Oh, here. There.
What's this?
I'll cash the check. Consider it a monthly allowance.
What about the rest of the money?
I'm holding on to it for safekeeping.
But it doesn't even belong to you.
Hey, she's my mother. I know what's best for her, all right?
So you can see by that video what I was talking about. People to live together, to making those decisions. There may be issues of even that control with the wife passing over the money. And this elderly mother, would she speak up? Would she say anything? He looks like he's in that power position. So these commercials really resonated with individuals in Ontario. That's where these were played, and they just resonate with individuals saying, these are the situations that we're coming across, and people think that they know best. I know best for mom, right? I know what's right for her, when in fact that's just abuse of power and control. So when you're recognizing some of those signs for financial abuse, we look for large sums of money going missing. We may see family members coming forward or maybe disclosing to you saying that, there's no money in mom's bank account. Maybe they've automatic withdrawals each month to go back into investments, and that's not happening now. The older adults in debt, and they have no idea why. They're signing documents that they may come into you and say, I don't understand. My daughter came in and told me to sign this. I don't know what's going on. They may have signed a power of attorney, and every jurisdiction is different. Laws and legislation around powers of attorney, the authority and the legislation that oversees them. However, like in Ontario, you can sit down at your kitchen table, write your power of attorney document, get it witnessed, and it's a valid power of attorney. You don't have to go and see a lawyer to get legal advice to write your power of attorney. We encourage people to do that, but not everybody does. So we see big issues around financial abuse of that powers of attorney, denying access or control, taking credit cards, bank cards, PIN numbers. You may see the person's living status has changed. They come to an appointment with a new best friend. Who is the best friend? Is it somebody that they've just met? Is it a person that's causing some undue influence, pressuring the individual to take out some money? You may see that they may talk about their wills being changed abruptly, that they've always had their son, they've always had a close relationship, and now they don't want to talk to them anymore. And this new best friend is, kind of moved in, and what they do is slowly isolate that person from those familiar supports and family connections. Also, we see that the person says that they maybe want to go to a retirement home, but the loved one is saying, no, she can't afford that. She needs to keep her money. One of the reasons that sometimes people or the power of attorney refuses to move an individual into care is because they want the checks and pensions to still come to the home, as opposed to paying for the direct care. Again, looking at their own wealth in the future, that there'll be less money for them to inherit in the future if that comes to be. So also recognizing some signs. So if a client comes in and they feel nervous or just not feel comfortable discussing their financial affairs as they always have been, maybe that's kind of one of those cues that you might kind of say, well, why are they feeling nervous? If that person is with another individual, maybe that's why. Maybe they're afraid they've made a bad financial decision and they're embarrassed about doing that decision that they've made. they don't remember some of certain transactions that they come in a month ago, and they've taken finances out, or they've transferred funds to a different accounts, and they don't remember. Like maybe that's a cue that maybe there's something going on. Was a person convinced to do that? There's dementia, the capacity is decreasing. There's a family member or a caregiver who's making those attempting to make financial transactions with respect to the client's asset without permission. I've had calls where, a son will call and say, well, my brother's, he's an advisor and he's asked for $60,000. Mom's in a retirement home. She doesn't need it. What's he doing with the money? So the other son, I call the good and the bad son, the son who's a POA may be doing things legitimately to pay for the care and the well-being of the mom. Maybe the mom would like that money, but the other son maybe, who's reporting it, maybe there is something going on. We don't know. He may call you as an advisor asking what's going on, but with client privilege, you can't provide that information. People can call and give you information, but you can't disclose back. It still is a red flag to say, next time I'm talking to that client, or there's a transaction request that comes through, maybe I need to be doing more questioning around what that trend, is this really what the older adult wants? Or who's pushing the buttons to get that transaction through? Is there undue influence? The person's pressuring them to cash in an investment that they don't really want to do so, or invest in something that's not in their best interest at their age. There's high risk. It doesn't make sense for that individual based on your knowledge of the client. So again, that misuse or the documentation around powers of attorney. How often do you actually get the copies of the power of attorney in your hand? Do you look at them? Do you get them reviewed by your legal department? Is there more than one person claiming to be that power of attorney? We get that back and forth. I'm the power of attorney, I'm not. I had a case just recently and it was back and forth around sisters, and I'm like, so who is the power of attorney? Who's got the actual document? And she couldn't say. She let on she was POA, but she didn't have she didn't have that physical piece of paper in her hand to actually give her authority to make any decisions. And yet she and her sister were both making decisions on their mom's behalf without any really legal authority to do so. And mom had dementia. So it's important to ask, who has that? Who's claiming? Where? Let's see the last copy of that document. Or they won't let the person actually even speak on their behalf. As I was saying before, just because someone has diminished capacity, depending on the extent of their inability to make decisions, they still have the right to seeing their bank statements, to talk with their clients. Again, that undue influence or financial exploitation happens. So there was a study done by the FAIR Canada and the Canadian Centre for Elder Law on financial and vulnerable investors. And they're just seeing this huge financial loss, and it goes through some of the safeguards and issues that you can pay attention to in the industry. And they make recommendations to the financial sector and government about how we can improve your work to protect clients and seniors in the community around these financial losses that are at play. So we talk about social isolation as a factor, family members, again, who may have substance abuse or unemployed, again, as those risk factors as well. We also have that extremely friendly person who might be moving into the person's life. Those individuals may be getting taken advantage of. We also have seniors who are very, very friendly and trusting. Those individuals are more likely to experience financial loss because they just want to help out. The person's in financial need. I'll just loan them the money. I can afford it at this point in time. They're going to give it back to me. And that risk, just that trust and relationship, gets taken advantage of, and that trust respect just goes down, and they go with the individual and agree to do what they ask to do. So in your work to try to sort of action plans to prevent financial abuse, I think it's important to help clients plan ahead. Most people don't want to think about planning ahead. They don't want to think about the what ifs. What if I become ill? What if I want to retire in the future, and these are my plans, how I want to live in the future. Sometimes people just are good with the status quo. But it's important, and you're in that position that you can educate, and not only within your office, but in community as well. Educate them about powers of attorney. How do you create one? We tell people, go to a lawyer, get these done legally, so then it is legitimized. You get informed information from a lawyer about what you're doing. They can assess if your ability to make or revoke a power of attorney, which is the low threshold is low. However, they have eye-to-eye contact as opposed to doing it at home and wondering who did this power of attorney document. How to use it. Most people don't know how powers of attorney work. We do so many workshops on powers of attorney, and you're in a great position to educate individuals around those, because even in community or in your workplace, that what their rights are. Most people think that once they sign it, the person who has that power of attorney thinks they can't make decisions on their own behalf anymore. Sometimes people don't know that they can actually revoke their powers of attorney. Where to go if someone's misusing it? What are the benefits? Like thinking ahead that if you don't have a power of attorney, who is going to access your account? Who can make decisions to access funds through their advisor? Who can actually speak to you as the advisor? If there's no authority, when the person becomes incapable, it puts you in an awkward position, but also the family members as well, because you can't disclose because of privacy, and then they can't get any information. So it puts everybody at that standstill, as opposed to power of attorney for care, when in Ontario, there's a hierarchy of decision makers under the Healthcare Consent Act. If there's no person that's been designated, there is a hierarchy of individuals. But we don't have that for personal or for your personal finances. Ask questions about what ifs. Ask questions like, what if you wanted to retire in 10 years? How, if you're giving this money, cashing large sums of money, what would you want to do in the future to live the lifestyle that you continue to live? Asking open-ended questions, allowing them to think through, that really helps. Asking them alone. If someone is in the room with them, they are the client, and you see that someone, that third party kind of intervening and saying, no, mom, this is what you wanted to do. This is how we want to plan it. You want to make me that power of attorney. Ask them to leave. You have the right to talk to that client individually by yourself on the one-to-one decision or one-to-one conversations. So if you're seeing some of those things happening, do that. Also, know your client. Have a copy of the power of attorney on file. We find that that's sometimes people don't ask for that. Ask for updates, any changes in health. If the person's recently had a stroke or any other health concerns, document that, because maybe that puts them a person at a different vulnerability that you need to be aware of. Document your conversations. You wouldn't believe some of the emails that we get in our workplace with people, those names, bank accounts. They'll send us documents. They send us emails that they've sent to other people. So people themselves, family members, will be actually keeping their own files about their conversations with you. So I would encourage you to also do the same, and I'm sure you do. But having that follow-up conversations, your concerns to be documented. I also would encourage you to have an emergency contact. So there may be the person who's a power of attorney, that person becomes, their capacity becomes compromised, where you can talk to that person who's not designated as in their power of attorney. But if that power of attorney person is the one who's misusing the money, who's withdrawing those funds, and they have the right to access funds, you don't know what there's limitations on what you perceive that they're working in their best interests. But you get that feeling that they're not acting appropriately or making bad decisions. If there's an emergency contact and you have that trusted contact person on file, that's not the power of attorney, you can then contact them and say, I'm just kind of concerned about Mary, that their POA has just withdrawn this much money. They've given you consent. And if the client has given you consent prior to that incapacity, but then, in your files and your policies and procedures, talk about what that trusted contact person is. How do you, what are the circumstances that you can call them, and under what circumstances, to give you sort of that protection as well. So the policies and procedures within your own organization are important. Use plain language, not only within talking to the individuals, but also in some of the legal or even information and educational brochures that you provide. Large fonts. Thinking about the meeting time, like settings, the lighting, noise, background. If it's loud and it's bright, the person might not be able to hear well. If you talk very fast, they may not be able to, understand. If again, asking the person to repeat what you're saying, because if they have a hearing loss, they may be nodding their head and agreeing with everything, but they may not even actually be able to hear you to comprehend what you're saying. So some of that sort of issues around just aging in general, to just think about. Not everyone will have circumstances of loss of hearing, but if we are, use common terminology, then everyone's going to hopefully understand what it is, understand what you're talking about, and understand the legal documentations that you're trying to get through. So just some checks and balances. Be aware of undue influence. We know what happens out in our communities where people are using that power, pushing someone to do something that they don't really want to do, but they're just agreeing with it. We saw lots of families who will just, fight with each other about the financial benefits that they're going to gain in the end. Recognize the validity of powers of attorney. How do you do that within your workplace? What do you need for proof? If the person's been deemed incapable, what do you need as proof and evidence for that? Having those in your policies will help you guide your response to abuse. And then looking at all the IROC rules, notices, and I don't have time to go through all those. The one thing I do want to indicate that I am spending time on financial abuse, but we are doing another webinar on financial abuse in a few weeks, which will get more into details around financial abuse particularly. So these are just some questions that you could ask an individual around their investments, how they're managing their money day to day. Capacity is important to understand, appreciate. Can they understand that? We don't have to be capacity assessors, but we should, do they understand the foreseeable consequences of some of their decisions? And I know, in speaking with Marie, that there will be a webinar on capacity and consent that's coming up, and you'll get a lot more information around that. I think just for today, though, I think it's important to sort of balance that duty to protect someone's financial safety of the persons with their right to autonomy. That's kind of hard because in some cases where we think the person might not be making a good financial choice, they're still capable of making choices. It's giving that informed information. So you've got documentation about, that they know what the risks are. You've kind of outlined what this decision is, what it could result in. They still choose to make a decision. That we all have the right to make bad decisions. Unfortunately, what we need to do is sort of balance that and take a stance to make sure that people are protected. And then there's some risks. I think we've kind of talked about the impact, about worsening conditions, and people are reluctant to report. There's many reasons. We talked about shame and fear. And just lastly, getting into some of the legislation. In Ontario, specifically our different retirement homes and long-term care homes, there is mandatory reporting. I would, just in terms of reporting concerns, looking at your suitability, report to public guardian trustee. Again, every jurisdiction will be different. There's options about reporting to police. Sometimes we'll just say to report to police, just asking, is this something, you don't have to give names. You can just stop and just say, here's circumstances, what could I do? Again, I know every legislation is different within provinces and territories. And there is no criminal code offense for elder abuse. So I outline what offenses would fall under financial abuse under here. So theft of power of attorney is a criminal offense. Breach of trust. There is also a federal legislation changed in a few years back where someone can be charged, increase in sentencing for aggravating factors, which is someone's taking advantage of an older person because of their age or a vulnerable of their position of authority. So the person who gets charged can get increased sentencing. Again, advice to your clients around basic planning for the future. And just lastly, before we wrap up, we have to work together. We can't do these things alone. If you come across situations, reach out to your community partners, your advocates, lawyers. If the person needs help, know who's in your region. A good resource to get started within the jurisdiction that you live in is with the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. If you go under what is elder abuse, there's a tab that says help, and it'll go under each jurisdiction that you live in, and it'll list the key provincial organizations that you can connect with to get support and services in your region. And you're probably very familiar with the Securities Administrators, IARC, and MFDA. Again, Canadian Centre for Elder Law is a great resource that you can get information from, especially from a legal point of view. And for information and resources, these are other websites. And you'll find also for your clients, if they need to speak with someone, many provinces and territories have senior safety lines where they can get information and resources. And if all else, Government of Canada has a website, seniors.gc.ca. It has a number of resources that you can access and links to areas in your particular province that has that. This is just a document from the FAIR report, and I'm going to wrap up. These are the documents that you can find from the government website, and that's it. I know where I'm getting the cue from Marie.
Thanks, Rianne. So I just have a couple of questions online and offline. So I'll start with the question online. It's not really a question, it's Holly has made an observation that some police forces will do wellness checks.
Yes.
Can you comment on that a little bit, please?
Yes, for sure. And I would encourage actually individuals to do that. So if you are concerned about an individual, you haven't heard from them, family members are concerned, you see maybe you see transactions happening or something's different, the police will, across Canada, if you ask for a check on the well-being, they will show up and knock on the door and ask to speak with Mrs. Smith. If Mrs. Smith is there, they just can say, we had a concern, just checking, make sure you're okay. We've had many cases where police will do a check and no one's home. The person maybe, the driveway is not clear, but they know that someone's in there. So they can't actually just barge themselves in, but they can check and then follow up with family members or make that connection. So that's, everyone could be encouraged to do a check on the well-being. And we work with our police forces here, and we encourage healthcare providers to, and family members to ask for a check on the well-being, and they can do that.
Excellent.
The other one is Crime Stoppers, which I didn't get to, is people can call Crime Stoppers anonymously and report their concerns. Again, police will go out if they have enough information that they feel that they need to, as a lead, they'll follow up. People can call Crime Stoppers with their concerns as well.
Okay. I have a question from David offline. How does someone in a counsel type position, an advisor, a lawyer, etc., deal with an older person who is in denial about obvious exploitations, particularly if the exploitation is not illegal? Would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a hard one, and we come across that where as even officers, I work with a lot of officers, and they will sit down with the person and tell them that this is, not in your best interest, someone is taking advantage of you. And if the person has the capacity, they know the risks, can they understand the risks? Ultimately, it's their decision about what they choose, but it's given that information, particularly from a financial advisor's point of view, documenting what you've indicated. The worst case scenario would be sort of the withdrawal, because you don't want to put yourself at risk saying, I did this transaction, the family comes after and says, well, why did you do that? Why did you take instruction when he's not competent or capable? But ultimately, if the person's competent and you've given information to your best ability and authority to, and they still choose to make bad decisions or live the way that we think is not appropriate, or making, it's not good in the long run for the individual, it's hard for us to say you can't do that, because they're adults, and we always have to presume people are capable until proven otherwise. It's really difficult, and we find families in those same circumstances that they see the best friend that's moved in is, they take advantage of the individual, and people are telling them, but they still continue to go along with that person. It's don't give up though. That would be my thing, is keep connection with that individuals, because what people happen is they pull away and they kind of go, well, I've told him 6 times, forget it. I've done my time. I'm fed up. I can't help anymore because he doesn't want to listen. So that's that isolation that starts to happen. And that's kind of what that power of control the individual wants to happen. So no one will check on, and they will continue to use that power to continue to use that authority that they have.
Yeah. It seems to me that you nearly need early on to make sure you know your client, obviously, and have done all the instructions that you've given around power of attorney and identifying a trusted individual. But also, I think, knowing the spouse, right?
Yes.
And then also knowing the children, so you get a better size up of the whole family situation well before you're in that kind of crisis.
Yeah, and that's if the senior wants to do that, right? Sometimes people will be very protective and not want others to know their business, right? Maybe they don't even tell their spouse what money they have invested. We see a lot of issues with blended families. That arises where their spouse has passed away, they've remarried, and then you have the kids that's, you know, at the person's, there's been investments that in dad's name, he remarries, and then let's say dad passes away, and then the kids from the dad will come and say, well, I'm a beneficiary, or I should get this. And then the other kids move in, and it's just right? We see a lot of that discrepancy happening as well, where there's conflict with finances. To the point that they actually even kick people out of their own parents' house.
So I guess it's best to take each situation as it comes and be as open and honest as you can as an advisor.
Yeah. There's not, yeah, I would say, you know, there's no cookie cutter approach to intervention and supports for these situations. There's a lot of things that we've learned over the years around prevention and intervention, but you do have to take each family and circumstance different in terms of looking at what are the dynamics, what are the circumstances, because every situation is so different. And it'll vary across jurisdiction, what resources you have and legislation that you have to support you as well.
Okay. Listen, Rianne, thank you very much for taking the time today to do this webinar. I had a couple of questions on CE credits. Just wanted to remind everyone that these webinars do not qualify for CE credits. We will be putting the deck up online, and we are recording. But we're having some challenges with the recording, so we're going to see if we can get the recordings up. But I've got you recorded, and we'll go from there. So listen, thank you very much, Rianne. It's been very enlightening. I think this is a good segue to the next one that you will do on elder abuse, going even further. So thank you.